Welcome everybody to episode 26 of Black, Brown, Yellow, White. And today I have the pleasure and privilege to have with me James Murua. He is a Kenyan literary journalist and founder of writingafrica.com, which is the go-to platform for African literary news. He was also a columnist for The Star and many numerous other media outlets. Since 2013, he's been spotlighting authors, festivals, and movements across the continent. Whether through blogs, posts, podcasts, or panels, Murua champions stories from Africa with sharp insights and no tolerance for tokenism. So thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
We'll start it very simple. Could you start by telling our audience who you are and how you would describe the work that you do?
So my name is James Murua. I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya. And what I do is I run a platform that highlights writing from Africans, wherever they are in the world. So I'm going to do stories about writers, poets, non-fiction writers based either on the continent, so Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and then I'll also talk about Africans who are based in the diaspora. So Brazil, Colombia, Jamaica. So for me, I don't consider Africans to be people who live on the continent, but people who are African by whether they're black. So if you're a black person and you're living in Brazil, I consider you an African.
Yeah.
So that's what I do. And the way I do it is I have a website or a blog, Writing Africa. I have a podcast where I do interviews on news. I have a YouTube channel where when I go to festivals or book events, I record and I post on the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And spaces like that. So of course I also do everything on social media, Writing Africa.
And how did this all begin? Not just, of course, paying attention to literature, but having this focus on Africa. Was there a moment, a book, or some kind of maybe even a frustration with the way things are? What was the initial impetus?
Well, I was having a drink. Many of my stories usually start with I was having a drink.
Yeah.
I was having a drink in one of the local bars in Nairobi, and we were meeting friends, and I met a man from Cote d'Ivoire, a visual artist, and we were chatting about what do we do, what do we each of us do? And he told me he's a visual artist, he's in Nairobi to do he was doing a residency or something. I can't remember his name. And then when he asked me what I do, I said, I'm a newspaper editor, and I have a newspaper column in the same newspaper, which is The Star.
Yeah.
And he asked me, but that's your Ugali writing. Ugali is it's like food. So that's your writing for your basics. What's your writing? And I realized all my writing I did was for my newspaper.
Yeah.
So I decided what I'm going to do, because I don't have any of my own writing. Everything is for the newspaper. I started doing stories about writers from Africa. And it's because I'm around writers. I'm married to a writer. My friends are writers. And I realized that there were very few people at the time. This is 2013.
Yeah.
Who are doing stories about writers from Africa. In a way that I would have liked to see doing. So I said, let me start this project. And what I did was, I gave it my name, jamesmurua.com, at that time. And it's because I thought, how many writers are there anyway? So if it doesn't work out, I'll just use it as a name for my resume.
Yeah.
And it turned out, as the years went by, I realized that African writing is bigger than I realized. Because you can imagine when I started, I just knew Ngugi, I knew Shoinka, I knew Chimamanda, the famous name.
Yeah.
And when I started my project, I said, I don't want to do stories about these names. I want to do stories about people who are not known.
Yeah.
And yeah, so in 2016, 3 years in, I actually lost my job with Star.
Mhm.
And I decided, let me try and see how deep I can go with it until I get employed. And it's been 9 years. So the website is 12 years old this year.
Yeah.
12 years. And I rebranded the name 2 years ago to writingafrica.com. Yeah. So that's the short version.
Yeah. So there's been some real longevity here. So the question for me would also be, what keeps you showing up when your energy runs low, or when you're maybe out of ideas or approaches? What keeps you going in all this time?
I do run out of energy. Like every year, like 2 or 3 months a year, I'm basically tired. I can't do anything. So I give myself grace when I feel like I'm not producing enough content.
Mhm.
I don't beat myself up, because if you do that, you lose your interest. Then the thing is, in that period when I was like 2016, I tried, because I didn't have anything else to do. You remember you had a full-time job, you're fully employed.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, and I used to do like 50, 60-hour weeks. That was a normal week for me.
Right. Yeah.
And then suddenly you have nothing to do. So I started doing this to like occupy my hours. And I found that, the more hours you throw into this project, it becomes like it's like you're doing something important. So number one, I gave myself grace when I felt that I'm waning.
Mhm.
And I give myself like that. There are weeks I just go like maybe post once or twice. And then I would go in. When I come back, I continue my normal rate. And then I actually am very, very hard-headed. It's a thing I've known about myself. When I focus on a thing, when I lock in, I jump in.
Yeah.
I've been locked in for the last 13 years.
That's very impressive. At this point of the interview, we normally do this jump where we just jump to the main topic, and maybe it's good to kind of recapture the spirit of what this series is doing, because as Black people, we are unfortunately often confronted with different forms of discrimination. The main one being often racism, and the idea is to get a mosaic across the world, how different perceptions, ways of dealing, thinking, confronting, etc. Are, from Kenya to the US to Australia. Really, I try to capture or get all these voices from all across the world. So in that spirit, and jumping into the deep end, what does racism look like from where you stand in Nairobi? So not in theories, but in practice, in the world of publishing, festivals, literary media.
So the thing is, racism is very interesting for me, because you can imagine that in Kenya, I'm doing stories about African people,
Yeah.
Black people. So you find I'm talking about book fairs in Kenya, in Zimbabwe, Zambia. And I'll tell you the truth, I wasn't really seeing racism at the point that I was doing it, because you can imagine that I'm just focusing on Black people. So initially, I wasn't seeing anything about racism, because I was focused on a specific niche of community. And but as time goes, I start noticing that the people I'm talking to and the people I'm covering, they're struggling, especially the because publishing is known as a very, very wide space in many parts of the world. So you find that a lot of these people they can't get deals that they are living in Europe or the US. And I thought it was a problem because that they're not living in Europe, that they don't have access to the publishing houses. So they don't get the deals, they don't get good advances, they don't get translation right deals done well. I thought it was a function of them living in Africa. Then in 2020, on the back end of George Floyd, the George Floyd phenomenon, somebody started a thing in the US they called hashtag publishing paid me on Twitter. And the concept of publishing paid me was black writers in the US and the UK were being given very minuscule advances compared to white writers. So, for instance, Roxane Gay, a very famous writer, said she got $40,000 advance for one of her most famous books, and then white allies came from other parts of Twitter saying, "Listen, I just showed up I'm just this person. Nobody knows me, but I got $500,000 as an advance. I got." A lot of these people are white people getting like very, very significant advances for their debut novels. Nobody knows them. And that was actually what opened my eyes, because in my mind I used to see it that we are affected because we're in Africa, because we don't have access to the big publishing system. So that period, that publishing paid me, hashtag publishing paid me, made me realize that the problem is not because we're living in Africa, but it was a bigger problem to do with black people and how they're treated, because people don't see us as an important people. They don't know how to work with us. So that's the time. Actually, 2020 is the time I actually changed my website. Because before that, it was just people who are living in Africa. And then in 2020, I said I'm going to embrace all Africans, because we are all having the same problem. We are struggling through the same situations. Whether you're living in London or you're living in Nairobi, whether you're living in Lagos or Berlin, you'll still have the same issues in my industry. You'll still have low advances. You'll have the only advantage you have in living in Berlin or London or Washington is that maybe you might get access to events that might pay you, but other than that, you have the same struggles to get published. You have the same struggle with advancing. Translations won't happen unless somebody actually lobbies for you. So that's my what do you call it? My engagement with the race conversation. And also remember, I'm a Kenyan. Sometimes, my society is very rich, but it's not very easy for us to see it, because most of us are black. So it's only when you get into the very, very high parts of the society, when you're dealing with a lot of money, that you'll see racism, because you're trying to go to a restaurant and then a person doesn't want to serve you because you only want to serve white patrons. So on a personal level, it's not the same, but on a professional level, 2020 was a turning point for me. That's when I've been noticing it, but when you see it in numbers, you realize, okay, this is something I hadn't thought about. I'd been looking at us as we are Kenyans or Africans in the diaspora, Africans on the continent, because Africans in diaspora have all the opportunities. I don't need to worry about it. So that's my engagement with the race in my field.
And we have this multiple axis of discrimination. So thinking of my own blind spots, I always, not always, but I mostly put this question to my female interviewees, but I think that is was a very wrong approach by me. So I'm gonna ask you, what have been your encounters or your thinking on sexism? How does it show up in the spaces you've worked in, or in the African literary scene? How does sexism manifest? And maybe you do find some comparisons or parallels to racism.
The one thing I have to mention is I cover fiction and poetry and non-fiction. And I don't know about the rest of the world, but in Africa, specifically fiction and poetry, the women are the ones who are the leading in that. So if you're thinking of an African writer, novelist, or poet, it's usually a woman who's the face of the industry. So you find more women have published, more women have done a lot of things as compared to men. However, the thing is, if you're a man who, for instance, you have one novel, you're more likely to be engaged, embraced by the industry faster than a woman with one novel.
Yeah.
Men have to do a lot more work for them to be recognized. Like, yeah, she's part of the establishment. I think Amata Edu said once that she was emerging until she was a legend. She was never in action. So that's So if you look at it on the surface, like, women are the ones doing the most, but in reality, women really, really struggle before they are really accepted within the industry. If I had one novel or two novels, I'm already somebody people want to work with. I'm already accepted. Yeah. Then there's the other aspect where, when we're talking about educational books, because there are two aspects in publishing and on the content. The biggest chunk of publishing is actually educational, for textbooks, for primary school, high school, college. And the biggest number of people in that space is men, because the publishing space there has a lot of money involved. So it's the men who are always at the front. So you find where money is involved, where there's money to be made, men will fight tooth and nail to have their manuscript at the front, for publishers recognized. So those are the two aspects. Where when we're doing the educational publishers, where imagine if you have a text on racism and it's accepted as a school text, you automatically sell 1 million copies around the country. So that means that where the money is a lot, men will camp on that. When the money is less, when there is less fighting, where there is, where people are trying to do novels and poetry, more women are there. But in spite of that, men, especially the ones who show up early, the ones who show up, with one or two pieces of books, they will go much farther than women who have been in the industry for that.
So there's a lot. There's still kind of discriminatory practices going on.
Yes. It's patriarchy at its finest, because the face of African writing is women, but the people who make the most money are men.
What do you think would it take for this kind of parameters to start changing significantly?
It's not likely to change significantly soon, because where a lot of money is involved, men will always camp there. Like when there's millions of X amount of, when it's millions of naira or millions of shillings or rands,
Yeah.
men will tend to camp there. So governments are the only ones who can make any changes at all. So they have to be government policies to, government policies have to be enacted to try and make it more fair. But remember that the face of African writing is women. So governments really don't have any incentive. Like, no, but we have Chimamanda Ngozi, we have Zogiswa, we have Jennifer Makumbi. Why do we do anything for women? But on the ground, the reality is the real money earners are.
Yeah. So we have these negative forces of discrimination, be it racism, sexism, other kinds of discrimination. And then on the positive side, I sometimes posit diversity. Though it's very controversial, it gets used a lot, and sometimes it can feel hollow. What would it look like, or what does it look like to you when diversity is taken seriously?
Diversity, because part of the problem is diversity. I really don't know what it would look like, because when you're in Europe, when you use the word diversity, you're trying to say we need to have more people of color in spaces or mainstream them. If you're in Africa, everybody or majority. The only markets which have significantly less different numbers of people is South Africa has a very large white population, and North Africa has a significant Arab population. So apart from those two spaces, most of Africa is black. So the idea of diversity may not work in the same way.
Yeah.
What we want to see, in what I would love to see as diversity, is to have more voices published from different parts of the continent. So, for instance, I'm in Kenya. Most of the people who get published are based in Nairobi. They're Nairobi people, maybe one or two people, that's the capital city, and then maybe one or two people from the other major cities. So for me, diversity is I'd love to hear voices from other parts of Kenya that we don't hear about. The northern area which is next to Somalia, where it's semi-arid, and there's a huge number of people who live there. So if you're in Uganda, I know that I want to hear stories from the north of Uganda.
Yeah.
Same as Nigeria, we need to have more North Nigeria stories. And clearly, all my concerns are no, but it's not just the north, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
So for me, the diversity would be like, I'd love to hear the stories of underrepresented people in our society. Because we're all black, I'd love to hear stories from the people who are the nomads. We rarely hear about that.
Yeah.
The only stories we really hear are from the people who live in the city. And the cities, they're big cities. So people who are living in Nairobi, Kampala, Lagos, and Abidjan. So that's what I would love. That's what I see as the diversity. More voices that we rarely hear.
So more voices that are not just focused on the capital of any given nation.
Yeah.
So now I'm gonna, or we will try to make also a bit more the link to your work and practice. You've mentioned that many African countries lack a proper or a very potent publishing ecosystem. What would you say is still missing, and what is starting to shift already?
We have so publishing ecosystems are very important for learning the society, because the one way to get information across a society um, in a fast way is through publishing. Many African countries, especially during independence, when independence was happening, many African countries had functioning publishing systems. They weren't like 100%, but they were functioning and they were burgeoning. They were starting to come out. Unfortunately, especially during the 60s to the 80s, many of the governments started seeing these publishing outfits as enemies of the state.
Yeah.
Many of them were threatened because the people who are in those spaces were criticizing government. So you find like many writers were thrown in prison, like Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who recently passed away. He was thrown in jail for his novels. Wole Soyinka was thrown in jail in the late during the Biafra period. So a lot of the governments decided to actually not invest in this space. The only space they allowed the publishing industry to try was in education.
Yeah.
And even then, it was very managed. They actually wanted to see what was coming out of these publishing houses, because they would approve the educational thing. To see a change in this, the governments of our countries need to change their attitude about the publishing the publishing industries in their country. And I'd love to see collaboration. So, like in East Africa, maybe we say we're going to do something together, and we're going to allow the publishing industry to breathe, number one, and we actually invest in that space, because publishing is one of the spaces where the investment is much higher than the return.
Yeah.
Because you can imagine if I invest maybe $10 million in ensuring that people can see them who they are and who they can be, especially when they are younger, it will actually influence the next generation.
Yeah.
So a $10 or $20 million investment in publishing can have huge reward. So for there to be change, number one, shift of attitude within government. That's actually the most difficult part.
Yeah.
Because governments to this day see the publishing industry as an enemy. It applies in Kenya, it applies in Uganda, it applies in South Africa. They see it as an enemy, or they ignore it. They're like, okay, as long as something doesn't come from there and make me look like an idiot or like a fool, ignore it. As long as we have a shift in mindset and we start investing in that space, the returns will be high for the society and eventually for the country. Yeah. So for it to change, it has to come from the very top. I know in Kenya, until the government decides that it doesn't want its writers are not its enemies, the shift is very, very huge.
Now, as you already mentioned, after George Floyd 2020, you focused more on all Black authors. From your perspective, what role do you've now mentioned earlier, just now actually, the political level, but what role do festivals and media play in this literary ecosystem?
Could you please repeat that last part? What role do who?
What role do festivals and media play in the ecosystem of literature?
Writing is a very lonely industry. Very lonely job, because you'll go and sit in front of your computer and you'll type out all day. And if you're a friendly person, you might talk to 2 or 3 writers and share like manuscripts or something. But it's really, really lonely. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what the impact of what you're doing. The only thing you see is, if you go to the bookstore, you see other writers' books and you read them. Festivals are very important because writers meet, engage. And when you have writers engaging, a lot of amazing things happen. We've seen this on the continent that, for instance, there was a very famous conference, the Makerere conference of 1962. And the writers who are invited for this conference, most of them didn't know each other.
Mm-hmm.
But when they met at this conference, they made lifelong bonds. And most of them, you know them. Wole Soyinka, Chinua Achebe, Ngugi Ndiongo, Louis Nkosi, all these writers, they formed a community, a group of people that going forward, they were like their own WhatsApp. You need this as a writer. I see this, for instance, in my coverage. I noticed that whenever there are groups of writers who come together to do things, they move faster. They move faster. They move as a. So, for instance, Kwani, the famous Kwani journal in Kenya, was formed as a result of people coming together, and then they decided to set up their own journal, and then suddenly it became a huge platform that everybody wanted to contribute to. The same applied to Timurenga. Timurenga also was a collective of people who came together and they formed this outfit where they could share work. So it applies to festivals because with festivals, people physically meet one another.
Yeah.
They meet other writers. Number two, festivals are important because writers meet human readers. Like people who are not in the industry. They're not meeting editors. They're not meeting proofreaders. They're not meeting. They're not meeting illustrators. They are meeting actual readers, and that's really valuable for writers. First of all, it validates them. You can imagine you've been working for 3 years, and your royalty statement isn't that high. Maybe you're in that year you only get $500. But you go to a festival and you meet fans, and you're like, this is the people you are writing the book for. You're writing for these people, so you get validation, and it makes you realize the work was worth it. So you're meeting fans, and you're meeting peers. You can't. That's worth it for the festival itself. Then of course, at festivals you can actually meet publishers or agents, because you can imagine maybe you have a manuscript you're done and you're trying to shop it to an agent. Your agent is trying to shop it in Europe or whatever, and then you go to the Arte Festival and then you meet somebody who is really interested in your work. So festivals are very important within the literature and publishing ecosystem because it's a space where the writer showcases himself. You can imagine it's like a musician at a concert where the musician sings so the people can see them. So the writer sings at a festival.
Yeah.
Media, I don't know, because it's really tough, huh? The writers do not get media in most countries. There are few radio shows.
Yeah.
Very few radio shows. Almost no TV shows. I think when there's a TV show, you know about it. Mostly, I know about a radio show in Ghana. I know one in Nigeria. I know a couple in Kenya. I know one or two in South Africa. There are less than 10 shows which are focused on writing and writing.
Yeah.
Alpha Blondie actually has a book club in Abuja, a very popular one.
Yeah.
Last time I checked. So there's such little media that focuses on writing that the people who are doing it, people like myself, become actually very, very prominent because there's very few spaces for writers to be seen.
Yeah.
So we need more of that. We need more, but at the moment it's very.
Okay. Thank you very much for putting that in perspective, because from the outside, it is a sector of society that is very difficult to get an idea of. In this last question, I would like to touch on digital doors and windows. Your site and podcast have become these go-to platforms for African literature. How important would you say are these digital tools in creating this space for African literature? And is there anybody who you think also might get left behind?
I'm gonna tell you the truth. When I started, it was a hobby. I told you, and then 3 years in, I became more serious. But in the last year, especially with the rise of the language models, the large language models, which we like calling AI, it's large language model. This is when I've actually seen how important the work people like me are doing, because if you're not on the internet, if you're not searchable, if people go to ChatGPT or they go to Google or they go to any of the others.
Yeah.
I mainly know about ChatGPT, maybe Grok.
Yeah.
These models that are being used will go into the internet and they will search what exists, which has already been indexed. If you're a writer and you are not in those spaces, you're basically dead to the world.
Yeah.
If you're and you don't have to have your own social media. And I never tell writers that they have to go and set up their Instagram account so that they can be seen. But if there's no people who are advocating for you online, whether it's bloggers, bookstagrammers, book talkers, you find that you will not have a space. I actually remember a couple of years ago, an agent telling me that it's gotten so bad that if you're trying to become a writer, there was a time when they were checking your Twitter numbers.
Oh.
And he told me initially they had settled on 15,000 Twitter followers as a good number to gauge whether this person is somebody we need to worry about, somebody we need to engage.
Yeah.
Because you can imagine publishers and agents want to sell the book, and they want to sell to your audience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the model for selling books shifted so drastically that if you're not build your name on, if you're not build a certain capital on the internet, you don't have a certain digital capital.
Yeah.
You will struggle, especially if you're trying to come through now. So you can imagine Wale Soyinka doesn't need to worry about it. He's an older man.
Yeah.
He's already at the last stage of his career. But you can imagine somebody who's in Nairobi now, and they've just finished college and they're trying to start their career, or somebody who's 25 and they have their first manuscript. They do not have a foothold on the digital. They're in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why people like me, people like Rachel Paper, she's based in the US, but she's a Nigerian based in the US. There's a Kenyan guy called Maisha Yetu.
Yeah.
There's the Johannesburg Review. So people like us are so important because we actually do the work and make it easier for everybody else to know what's happening in the space. I mustn't forget JLIT, Journal of Young African Literature, JLIT. So people like us actually, we do the work that makes it easier for you to first of all, we do the work such that the information is available in the internet. So if September you decide that you're going to have a new book, and I decide, okay, I like the concept, I like the publishing, and I put it in my book digest, you do an event in Frankfurt, and I do a little story about, somebody did an event in Frankfurt, here's the photos. That allows the people who are making those decisions to, okay, this was featured in this important website, and we'll take it seriously also. So these digital spaces are important, and are even more important than they were 10 years ago, 15 years.
Yeah. So it's really shifted the whole landscape.
It has. I mean, I hope I'm answering your question the way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Sorry, yeah.
For instance, like when I started my website in 2013, there were 2 or 3 people who were running websites, but they stopped doing it. So you find a lot of their content, it just vanished into the ether. But the stuff that's there now will not vanish, because the language models are sucking everything up.
Yeah.
So it's either you're inside the belly of the beast. You'd rather be inside there if you want to get noticed. You want to be part of the canon. You have to be there now. So that's why nowadays I'm really, really serious. Initially, I wasn't so serious with it. Like sometimes I'd make errors. I'm like, yeah, whatever. But now I'm really, really serious, because I know the stuff I'm doing is being like when I Google stuff, I see actually my website has been referenced. Yeah, this is there in writing. I'm okay. So I need to be serious.
Yeah. Thank you very much. The second to last segment is what they call non-trigger triggers. So hopefully not triggering psychologically or traumatically, but a trigger of thinking. And you can just give like brief ad-libs. It could be a word, a sentence, something like that.
Yep, let's go.
Okay. Festivals as gatekeepers.
They are platforms which are built by human beings.
And
human beings will have their bias. So the only thing that we need to concerns me is if there is a huge amount of work that's available that is being deliberately being ignored by the festival. I don't think that's the case.
Yeah.
You find the really high quality work. If you go to any festival, whether it's Ake Festival in Lagos, whether it's the Nairobi Lit Fest in Nairobi, whether it's the Open Book Festival in Cape Town, the writing in a society, there's a lot of writing happening, but you can't have everything in a festival.
Yeah.
Festivals are 2 or 3 days. You can only host maybe 20 or 25 writers in the whole festival for it to make sense, because remember, people will get fatigued anyway. You can imagine having a festival of 200.
Yeah.
You're not going to see all of them anyway. So the people who organize festivals have to curate lists that they think their audiences will enjoy and that are valuable to the audience. So for me, festivals are platforms. They are human platforms, but they're platforms. They're not gatekeepers. At the beginning of this conversation, when I started my journey, I think that there were gatekeepers. But as I worked with festival organizers, I worked with, sponsors. I understood the money behind a festival. Festivals are really expensive.
Yeah. Like
really expensive. Like I saw that the Open Book Festival did a call out for their 2025 edition, and they were asking for 500,000 rand. I don't know how much that is in dollars, but it's a lot of money. And that's one festival.
Yeah.
So you have to use your money wisely. There are so many things that go into the festival that when you're on the outside, you think, oh, it's because these people are blocking me. No one is blocking anyone. Most festival organizers are actually fighting for their festivals to survive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think of festivals as gatekeepers. I think of them as platforms.
Okay. Then token diversity.
I don't think that really applies in my world. Token diversity, I don't know, man. Like token. I mean, we need to see more voices from the periphery, and we don't have enough. I've mentioned it. We don't have enough voices from the periphery, but then even the mainstream doesn't have enough voices.
Yeah.
We don't have enough people publishing novels, poetry collections on the continent right now of a high. So maybe you'll find maybe 5 or 6. Altogether, you might find maybe 100 or 200 books published on the continent.
Yeah.
That's not enough. So I just think we need more of everything, not more of one, just more.
Yeah. Then I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly. Emechita's The Joys of Motherhood.
Gucci. I really don't have much to say. Like this was gonna be the one that goes. I haven't yet.
Then blogging as archive.
Oh, this I have some. Blogging. I think it's a movie called Pretty Woman. Julia Roberts and somebody else. And the male protagonist, he tells the Julia Roberts character that he's a journalist because he wanted to be a writer. But then now he's writing. He's because journalism is literature in a hurry. And I actually see blogging as journalism in a hurry.
Yeah.
So we're the fastest version of that in that conversation. And then what that means is that, like, I look at my website because it's a self-driven website. I make so many errors. Almost embarrassing. It's like if you look at the amount of errors I make, no newsroom would allow me to publish most of the stuff I do. But because blog allows you to be a bit flexible, it's a bit of an interesting animal. But the reality is, a lot of the stories I do, a lot of the stories that are not important, like I don't think they're important, but I'm I'll do a little 300-word thing about it.
Yeah.
And I've discovered especially in the last 1 or 2 years, I've realized most of the things that I was doing as a little thing, most of those projects died. The people moved on.
Yeah.
So there are festivals which I used to do stories about, they don't exist anymore. The only evidence that those things happen are on my website. And it's festivals, it's journals, it's publishing houses. So the blog is an archive. It's sometimes the only evidence that something existed.
Yeah.
So I salute that. I believe it strongly in that. So as I said at the beginning, you don't really see it. But after this is my 12th year, I'm like, no, there are things which I like I did a call out for a journal called Kabaka. It eventually didn't make it into the world because the person who was the editor fled Nigeria. If that guy wants to look for Kabaka, the only evidence that it exists is on my blog. Yeah, and that's just an example. There are so many like Abidjan who are doing. There are some people from Abidjan who are doing a new initiative to try and get people to start reading more.
Yeah.
So Abidjan Lit. And they started really strongly, and I was doing whenever they do it, I do a story about it. I take the pictures that they had on Facebook and put it on my website.
Yeah.
And the initiative died, and they moved on with their life. But some of them still use it as for their resume that I was part of only. Guess where they send people? Yeah, so blogs are a very important archive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then Swahili. Full stop.
Very important language in this part of the world. I speak the language. I speak very, very fluently for Kenyan and very, very poorly for Tanzanian.
Okay.
Which is it's a joke we in Kenya we have, because just like English has English, Kiswahili has Kiswahili.
Ah.
Yeah, so there's Kiswahili from Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya, Congo, Rwanda, Burundi. Yeah, so I actually consider Kiswahili to be the most important language in Eastern Africa. If you speak Kiswahili, you're actually likely to really not struggle in any of East Africa.
Yeah.
Even Uganda, the Ugandans initially they were very, very anti-Kiswahili, and I understand because the Idi Amin security forces spoke Kiswahili.
Yeah.
And so the people of Uganda were really against this language because it was the language of hegemon.
Yeah.
But in the last 20-30 years, the language has really grown as people have immigrated, to Uganda, or from Uganda to Kenya and then back, or from Kenya to Tanzania. So Kiswahili is our language, and I love it because it's one of the few languages. First of all, it's the only language that's an African Union language.
Yeah.
That's the only African language that's an African Union. So, I love Swahili. I love whenever we are seeing events around Swahili. For instance, we had the Swahili festival that ran for a couple of years in Mombasa.
Yeah.
And I'd take myself down there just to cover events because I think it's a very important language. We have the Kiswahili Prize, the Safal Cornell Kiswahili Prize, where people hand out $15,000 every year for manuscripts. So it's actually the richest prize for an African language in the world. So I'm all Swahili, man. We need more Kiswahili speakers.
Okay, thank you. Then in the last segment, we move on to advice and practices. If you could hand the young James Murua one book or one piece of advice, what would it be?
The first piece of advice would be, don't give up. Don't second guess yourself. Just go with it, because whatever is coming at the other end of the tunnel, it could be much better than you think it could. The one text I would have loved to have read when I started this book was The Rise of the African Novel by Bukoma Ngugi. So The Rise of the African Novel, it tries to say the idea that African literature started in 1962 with the Makerere Conference is a lie.
Yeah.
A lot of people have this idea that Chinua Achebe was the father of African literature, and the book debunks that concept. And the reason it does that, it's not that they're trying to say that these people are not important in African literature, but we're trying to say that there is no one place when African literature starts, and we need to borrow from all the tributaries of African literature from all the periods it was working. Because in the past, it just used to be, we have Chenua Achebe, Shoinka, Gugi, Ata Aidu. Those are pioneers. And we are unfair to them because, they were the people who first wrote in English language that we know. But there were many people who are producing work in many languages in the past.
Yeah.
And when I read this book, it really helped me rethink the way I thought about African literature. Because before that book, I just used to cover English literature. I used to say it's Nigeria, Kenya, Zimbabwe, South Africa, the English-speaking Africa. And when I read that book, I realized, no, African literature is a bit wider than that. It's Kiswahili literature, which I mentioned. It's Hausa literature. It's people writing in Tulsa, in South Africa. So don't second give yourself. Don't get depressed. I used to get a lot of depression because I thought, what the heck am I doing? Because you're on the right track, and then read Rise of the African Novel and other texts, because there are many other texts like that. But I think Rise of the African Novel was key to how I thought my role is.
Okay. Thanks. Then last words to the black, brown, yellow, white crowd, to the listeners. Yours, anything you could or would like to share with young readers, educators, activists who are trying to shift things from the ground up?
First of all, free Palestine. We must always remember free Palestine, free Congo, free Sudan. And also remember that the world we live in today is not the way the world will look like in 10, 15 years. And a lot of the time, most of us only think about the problems we are dealing with now. And we forget that many of these things are changing. If, for instance, somebody could have told you that we're going to be doing a podcast 30 years ago.
Yeah.
If somebody had told you 30 years ago that we have a podcast where people will listen on their phone, and then they'll be hearing people talking from around the world, they would have laughed you out of the room. So the possibilities of what you can do are much bigger than you think. So I'm asking you to sit in your space, do the work, and don't give up like I had. For many times I wanted to give up. Don't give up. Do the work. It might not work out in 5 minutes, but it will work out. And remember that it should work out because the next generation of people behind you will pick up where you have and go run with it. So go for it. Don't stop.
Thanks so much, James, for these inspiring words and the inspiring interview. Many new aspects of African literature and the African literary scenes to think about. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure talking to you doing this interview.
I've had fun. I just hope it's gonna be useful.